My name is Olivia Reed. I'm 26 years old and I live in Seattle. Like most people my age, I use dating apps. It's hard to meet people in person these days, so swiping left and right became a daily routine for me. A few weeks ago, I matched with a guy named Ethan. He looked handsome, had that rugged photographer vibe, and his bio said he was capturing the beauty of the world one shot at a time. His photos were amazing too. Scenic landscapes, portraits of models, and candid shots of everyday life. We started chatting, and he seemed charming, funny, and really into photography. After talking for a couple of weeks, Ethan suggested something that caught me off guard. "Why don't you come to my studio for a photo shoot?" he said one evening. "You'd be the perfect model." I hesitated at first. I'm not a model, and I've never done anything like that. But he kept assuring me it would be fun, and I figured, why not? It's just a few pictures. Plus, he was so nice over text that I didn't feel any reason to worry. I agreed, and he gave me the address to his studio. That's when things started to feel off. The location was in a part of town I wasn't familiar with, an industrial area filled with warehouses. I asked him about it, and he brushed it off. "It's just where I work. The light's perfect there," he explained. His words were convincing, but a little knot formed in my stomach. I decided I was overthinking things. The day of the shoot, I drove out to the address. The warehouse looked abandoned. Rusty metal walls, broken windows, and a single flickering light above the door. My gut was screaming at me to turn around, but Ethan had been so nice to me that I pushed the feeling aside. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, Ethan opened it, grinning. "Hey, you made it," he said, pulling me into a hug. His energy seemed different, less friendly, more eager. But I smiled and stepped inside. The interior was a mess. It didn't look like a studio at all. Instead of professional equipment and clean spaces, the place was cluttered with old furniture, broken picture frames, and trash scattered across the floor. I couldn't shake the sense of dread that was growing inside me. "Where's your studio?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Right here," he said, pointing to a corner where a single camera sat on a tripod. The walls around it were covered in photos. At first, I couldn't make out the details, but as I got closer, I realized they were all pictures of women. Something about them made my skin crawl. The women were in unnatural poses, contorted, stiff, and their eyes were empty, dead. It was like they had no life behind them. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Ethan's demeanor shifted, his charming smile faded, and his eyes grew cold. "Just models," he replied, his tone flat. "Let's get started. Stand over there." I didn't move. Every instinct told me to leave, but I felt frozen. Ethan stepped closer, his face inches from mine. I said, "Stand over there." He repeated, his voice low and threatening. I forced myself to move toward the spot he pointed to, but my hands were trembling. He began directing me into strange poses, asking me to tilt my head unnaturally, twist my body in ways that felt wrong. Every click of the camera made my heart race. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, like I was another one of those lifeless women on his wall. Then I noticed something horrifying. Some of the women in the pictures were wearing the exact same clothes I was. The same shirt, the same jeans. It was like he had planned it all, down to every last detail. I knew I had to get out. "Ethan, I don't feel well," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I should go." He didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted his camera, ignoring me completely. Panic set in. I took a few steps back, inching toward the door. "What are you doing?" he snapped, finally looking up from his camera. His voice was filled with anger now. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, Ethan grabbed my arm, yanking me back. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. I could see the darkness in his eyes now, the danger that I had been too blind to see before. I didn't think. I just acted. I twisted out of his grip, ran for the door, and slammed it behind me. I sprinted to my car, my hands shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to get the keys into the ignition. As I drove away, I didn't look back. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those photographs. Something wasn't right. I did some digging online and my blood ran cold when I found a missing persons forum. There they were. Pictures of some of the women from Ethan's wall. All of them had disappeared after meeting someone on Tinder. I reported Ethan to the police, but when they went to the warehouse, it was empty. He had vanished, just like the women in the photos. I can't stop thinking about how close I came to being one of them. My name is Lily, and I'm 26, living in Portland, Oregon. Like many people my age, I've been navigating the world of online dating, trying to meet someone genuine. A few weeks ago, I matched with a guy named Jake on Tinder. His profile was normal, almost boring, but in a comforting way. He had a kind smile, brown hair, and seemed approachable. We chatted for a few days, and he came across as sweet and respectful. Eventually, we decided to meet for drinks at a cozy bar downtown. I was a little nervous, but when I arrived, Jake was already there, sitting at a booth, smiling warmly at me. He looked just like his pictures, and the first hour of our date was great, honestly. We talked about work, hobbies, and random stuff, like our favorite movies. He was attentive, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I started to relax, thinking maybe I'd finally found someone worth pursuing. But then, as we were talking about Tinder, I mentioned a previous date I had gone on the week before. It wasn't a big deal, just small talk. I noticed a shift in Jake's demeanor. His smile faded, and his posture stiffened. His eyes, which had been warm and engaging, became cold. The change was almost immediate, like a switch had been flipped. "So you're still seeing other guys?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Well, I'm just dating. Nothing serious yet," I replied, trying to laugh it off. His next question caught me off guard. "How many guys have you met on Tinder? Have you slept with any of them?" I blinked, stunned. The tone of our conversation had taken a dark turn, and I felt increasingly uncomfortable. "That's personal," I said, forcing a smile, trying to lighten the mood. But Jake didn't smile back. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. "I think it's important to know these things. You don't want to be with someone who's been around too much, right?" My heart raced, and I felt a growing sense of unease. "I think I should get going," I said, grabbing my purse. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. Jake didn't protest. He just sat there, staring at me, a slight smirk forming on his face. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea," he said softly, his words sending a wave of dread through me. I hurried out of the bar without looking back. Later that night, I received a message from Jake. I hesitated before opening it, hoping it was just him apologizing for being weird. But when I read the text, my blood ran cold. "You'll regret swiping right." My stomach dropped. I blocked him immediately, telling myself it was just a bad date and that I wouldn't hear from him again. But the next day, things took a terrifying turn. While scrolling through Instagram, I saw it, a photo of me from last night, taken without my knowledge. It wasn't just one photo. There were several, all posted under an anonymous account. Pictures were from different angles, and in one, I was laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that I was being watched. The captions were even worse. "She's mine now. Watch her." I felt sick. I hadn't noticed Jake taking any photos during our date. How had he done this without me seeing? Panic gripped me. I quickly reported the account and took the photos down, but the damage was done. Jake had been stalking me. Not just last night, but for who knows how long. I stayed inside for days, terrified of leaving my apartment. Every creak in the hallway, every knock at the door made my heart pound. I checked my locks twice, sometimes 3 times before going to bed. I started avoiding social media altogether, terrified of finding more photos or messages from Jake. A week later, I spotted him. I was walking to the grocery store, keeping my head down, trying to blend in, when I saw him across the street, leaning against a lamppost. He was staring directly at me, that same cold, smirking expression on his face. I froze, fear paralyzing me. He didn't move, didn't try to approach, just stood there, watching. I turned and ran. I went to the police, but without any concrete proof of harassment or a real name. There wasn't much they could do. Jake had vanished from Tinder, and the fake Instagram account was gone. I didn't even know if Jake was his real name. Since that day, I've been living in a constant state of fear. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number, and deleted all my dating profiles. But the paranoia remains. Every time I leave my house, I feel like I'm being watched. I still see him sometimes, always in the background, always watching. And I'll never forget those words. You'll regret swiping right. Story 3. My name is Jason Parker. I'm 32, living in Seattle, Washington. I work a regular 9-to-5 office job. And like everyone else in this city, I've been trying my luck on dating apps. Tinder specifically. I figured it was the best way to meet someone new. A few days ago, I matched with this girl named Claire. She had dark, curly hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that made her seem like the most genuine person I'd ever seen. Her profile was simple. She liked hiking, dogs, and trying out new restaurants. We started chatting, and things clicked immediately. It felt natural. After a week of messaging, Claire invited me over to her place for dinner. I'll admit I was nervous, but excited. She seemed like the real deal, kind, funny, and down to earth. So when Friday came around, I drove over to her house, which was in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. Her place was cute, just like I imagined. Small, cozy, with a well-kept garden out front. She greeted me at the door with that same warm smile, and I instantly felt at ease. Dinner was great. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, places we'd travel, and even childhood memories. It felt like I had known her for years. After dinner, she offered to give me a quick tour of the house. I didn't think much of it. The living room was clean and nicely decorated, and the kitchen was modern, with the faint smell of the lasagna we'd just eaten still lingering in the air. Everything seemed perfect until we reached the last room. It was a small bedroom at the end of the hall, and when Claire opened the door, I noticed something odd. The room didn't look lived in. Instead, it was filled with stuff, random objects, watches, wallets, phones, even some sunglasses. It was strange, like a collection of personal things that didn't belong together. I asked her about it, trying to sound casual. "What's all this?" She laughed, but it was a little too forced. "Oh, just some memories from old boyfriends. You know how it is. Keepsakes." Keepsakes? It didn't sit right with me. There were way too many things for it to just be memories from a few exes. I counted at least 10 watches, several phones, and wallets stacked up in piles. Something inside me screamed that this wasn't right. I tried to stay calm, but the unease crept in like a shadow. I smiled and nodded, not wanting to cause a scene. But every second I stayed there, I felt more trapped. I decided to leave. "I should get going. It's getting late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Claire's smile faded, and something dark flickered in her eyes. "Oh, don't be silly, Jason. You just got here. Stay a little longer." Her tone had shifted, becoming colder. I made my way toward the front door, but when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. From the outside, I felt a rush of panic but tried to keep calm. "Hey, I think the door's stuck." Claire stood behind me. Her expression completely changed. The warm, friendly woman I had dinner with was gone. In her place was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. I turned to face her, my heart pounding. "Claire, I really need to go." She smiled again, but it wasn't the same smile from before. It was twisted, cruel. "You're just like the others, always wanting to leave too soon. But don't worry, Jason, you won't get far." The realization hit me like a truck. This wasn't just a room filled with old boyfriend's things. Those weren't memories. They were trophies. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. Claire had been luring men through Tinder, trapping them, and who knows what else. I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I rushed past her, heading down the hallway, desperately searching for another way out. I found a window in the living room. It was small, but I could squeeze through it. Claire was behind me, her footsteps growing louder. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking. I could hear her getting closer. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said softly, as if we were discussing the weather. Finally, the window gave way, and I threw myself through it, landing hard on the grass outside. I didn't stop. I ran to my car, my heart racing, and sped off, not daring to look back. I called the police as soon as I was a safe distance away, but by the time they got to Claire's house, she was gone. The place was empty, like she had never lived there. It's been a few weeks now, and I still have nightmares. They never found her, and sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, swiping right on her next victim.